My sister's husband laughed that I'm just a walking ATM. So I exposed his fraud, cut off dollars, and now he's begging me for forgiveness. I, 34, male. Before I dive into the absolute cluster that my life has become, let me paint you a picture of how we got here. My parents immigrated to the US when I was 4, part of that classic American dream chase that so many of us are familiar with. Dad was an engineer back home, but you know how that story goes. He ended up working 2 jobs here because his degree wasn't recognized. Mom was a teacher who became a housekeeper. Well, same story. They busted their asses to give us a shot at something better. Then Dad passed when I was 12. Sudden heart attack. Just gone. Left Mom alone to raise me and my sister Rachel, 31, female, in a country that still felt half foreign to her. I remember the night it happened like it was yesterday. Mom sitting at our tiny kitchen table, bills spread out everywhere, crying when she thought we were asleep. That image, it did something to me, lit a fire under my ass that never really went out. So I studied, like really studied. The kind of studying where your teachers call your mom because they're worried you're not getting enough sleep. The kind where you skip parties, prom, and pretty much everything else because you got this voice in your head saying failure isn't an option. Ended up graduating valedictorian, which sounds impressive until you realize our class only had 84 students. But hey, it was enough to land me a full ride to study computer science at a pretty decent state school. College was different. For the first time, I was around people who actually got excited about the same nerdy stuff I did. Started doing hackathons, security competitions, that kind of thing. Found out I had a knack for finding holes in systems, legally, of course. By junior year, I was already doing freelance security audits for local businesses. Not much money, but enough to send some home to Mom every month. After graduation, I got offers from some big tech companies. Good offers, the kind that make your immigrant mom cry happy tears when you tell her. But something didn't feel right. I kept seeing these small and medium businesses getting absolutely wrecked by ransomware, phishing scams, data breaches, all stuff that could have been prevented with basic security measures. The big companies had entire teams dedicated to this stuff. But the little guys, they were just sitting ducks. That's when I decided to start my own cybersecurity consulting firm. Was it terrifying? Absolutely. Did I have any idea how to run a business? Nope. Did I spend the first 6 months living on ramen and energy drinks working 20-hour days? You bet. But by 26 it was actually working, like really working. We specialized in helping smaller businesses get their security up to par without breaking the bank. Found a niche market in medical practices. Those small doctor's offices that needed to be HIPAA compliant but couldn't afford the big consulting firms. Now at 34, the firm pulls in anywhere from $400,000 to $600,000 annually, depending on contracts. Not trying to brag, trust me, that becomes relevant later in this story. Just want you to understand that I worked my ass off to get here. Every penny was earned through late nights, missed weekends, and the kind of stress that makes your eye twitch. Enter my sister's husband, Mike. 36, male. God, even typing his name makes my blood pressure spike. You know those guys who always have a $1 million idea? The ones who've read exactly one book about entrepreneurship, probably Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and now won't shut up about passive income streams? That's Mike. Classic entrepreneur type who never met a get-rich-quick scheme he didn't love. Always talking about crypto, NFTs, real estate flipping, basically anything that promises maximum returns with minimum effort. The real tragedy? My sister Rachel. She's brilliant, like actually brilliant, has a PhD in biology, was doing groundbreaking research in gene therapy, had multiple papers published before she was 30, but she gave it all up to support his dreams. Yeah, traded in her lab coat for a position as Mike's personal cheerleader and enabler. Looking back now, I should have seen the red flags, the way he'd corner me at family gatherings to pitch his latest scheme. How he'd always managed to steer conversations toward how much money my business was making. The not-so-subtle hints about how families should support families' dreams. But you know how it is. You don't want to be the one causing drama, especially when your mom's already been through so much. Plus, I was busy building a business, trying to have some semblance of a personal life, dealing with the unique joys of being the successful child in an immigrant family. You know what I mean, the constant pressure to help everyone, be there for everyone, solve everyone's problems because you're the one who made it. Looking back now, it's almost impressive how methodically Mike worked his way into my finances. It wasn't just random requests for money. It was a carefully orchestrated dance of manipulation, guilt-tripping, and what I now recognize as straight-up emotional abuse. Let me break down how this pattern developed over the last 6 years, because maybe it'll help someone else recognize these red flags before they lose nearly $500,000 to their sister's parasite of a husband. It started small, as these things usually do. Mike came to me with a guaranteed investment opportunity in some obscure cryptocurrency I'd never heard of. This was back in 2019, when crypto was hitting all-time highs and everyone thought they were going to be the next Bitcoin millionaire. He had all these fancy presentations, screenshots of other people's gains, and even testimonials from supposed investors. The initial ask was for $20,000, which I hesitated about. But then Rachel got involved. "He's really done his research on this one," she said. "You know Mike. He wouldn't ask if he wasn't absolutely sure." And there was my brilliant sister with her PhD and her once scientific mind completely convinced that her husband had cracked the code to crypto wealth. So I gave him the money. A week later, he came back saying we needed to double down to maximize our returns. Then again, and again. Before I knew it, I'd sunk $85,000 into what turned out to be a classic pump and dump scheme. Did I ever see that money again? Take a wild guess. But that was just the beginning. Soon after the crypto disaster, they couldn't make rent. Rachel called me crying at 2 a.m., talking about how they were going to be evicted. "Just this once," she begged. "Mike has several deals about to close. I sent $35,000 to cover their back rent and the next few months." 3 months later, same call, different tears. This happened 3 separate times, totaling another $115,000 down the drain. There was my lake house. I'd bought it as an investment property, planning to rent it out during peak seasons and use it myself during the off-season. Mike convinced me to let him use it for his networking events, claiming he was building connections with high-net-worth individuals who could become potential clients for my cybersecurity firm. Sounded reasonable enough, right? Wrong. These networking events turned out to be glorified parties where Mike would pitch his latest schemes to other wannabe entrepreneurs. They trashed the place every single time. Broken furniture, stained carpets, even a hole in one wall that Mike swears was already there. The cleaning and repair bills alone were enough to make me question my life choices. But the credit card situation? That's when things went from bad to worse. Mike came to me with this brilliant idea about starting a business consultancy. All he needed was a business credit card to get things rolling. His credit was shot. Red flag number 437 that I ignored, so he needed me to co-sign. "It's just to build business credit," he said. "I'll make all the payments." You can probably guess how that turned out. Maxed out at $25,000 within 2 months. When I confronted him about it, he had the audacity to tell me that business expenses are an investment in our future. Our future, since when was his pipe dream my future? The smaller loans were almost worse than the big ones. It was death by 1,000 cuts, $500 here, $11,000 there. Always with some urgent reason, car repairs, medical bills that I later found out didn't exist, business supplies for businesses that never materialized. Each time the same promise, "I'll pay you back as soon as this deal closes." Spoiler alert, no deal ever closed. But here's the real kicker. My whole family not only enabled this behavior, they actively encouraged it. My mom, who watched my dad work himself to death trying to provide for us, became Mike's biggest cheerleader. "Family supports family," she'd say, conveniently forgetting all the times I'd supported them. "When your father was starting out, everyone helped him." "Yeah, Mom, Dad was working 2 legitimate jobs, not running investment scams." Rachel was even worse. "You're single with no kids. What else would you spend it on?" she'd say, as if being childless meant I had some obligation to bankroll her husband's delusions. The fact that I was saving for my own future, trying to build something sustainable, meant nothing in their eyes. I was just being selfish with our family's resources. The extended family piled on, too. My aunts and uncles, who never bothered to help when Mom was struggling to raise us alone, suddenly had lots of opinions about how I should be spending my money. "When are you going to help your sister achieve her dreams?" they'd ask at every family gathering. Funny how Rachel's dreams used to be about curing diseases and now they're about supporting Mike's latest scheme. I tried setting boundaries, tried explaining that I needed to think about my own future, but every attempt was met with the same guilt trips. Blood is thicker than water. Family always comes first. Your father would be so disappointed in you. They weaponized Dad's memory, using it to manipulate me into keeping the money flowing. You know how they say the straw that breaks the camel's back is never really about that final straw? It's about all the weight that came before it. Well, my camel's back didn't just break, it shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. and the trigger was my 2024 Porsche 911. Let me set the scene. After years of pouring money into Mike's schemes, supporting my family, and generally being everyone's financial safety net, I finally decided to do something for myself. The car wasn't even that impulsive of a purchase. I'd been saving for it specifically, ran the numbers a dozen times, and made sure it wouldn't impact my ability to maintain my business or help Mom with her actual needs. I remember the day I bought it. First time in my life I walked into a dealership and didn't feel like an imposter. Didn't have my dad's voice in my head telling me to be careful with money. Didn't calculate how many family emergencies I could handle if I spent this much. Just bought something because I wanted it and had earned it. The day everything fell apart started normally enough. It was Sunday, and I was at Mom's house helping her cook dinner. This was our thing. Every other Sunday, I'd come over early and we'd spend the afternoon in the kitchen. She'd tell me stories about Dad, teach me old family recipes, that kind of thing. It was peaceful, normal, until I heard the unmistakable sound of my car starting up. Here's something you need to understand about the 911. It has a very distinctive sound. That flat six engine has a particular growl that you can't mistake for anything else. So when I heard it fire up outside Mom's house, knowing I hadn't given anyone my keys, my heart dropped into my stomach. I ran outside to find Mike in the driver's seat, Rachel riding shotgun, and a small crowd of our cousins gathered around like it was some kind of car show. Mike was revving the engine, showing off features he had no right to be touching, and acting like he owned the damn thing. The keys? He'd taken them from my jacket pocket while I was cooking. Just helped himself, like they were community property. Mike, get out of my car. I tried to keep my voice level, professional, the way I'd talk to a difficult client. His response? He laughed. Not just a chuckle, but a full-on condescending laugh that made my blood boil. Chill, bro. Just showing everyone your midlife crisis purchase. Besides, you never use it properly. You're just a glorified calculator who got lucky with computers. That would have been bad enough. But what happened next was what really broke me. Everyone laughed. Not just polite chuckles, but deep, genuine belly laughs. My own family, people I'd supported and helped for years, laughing at me being disrespected in my own car that I'd bought with my own money. Mom's reaction was the final nail in the coffin. She came out wiping her hands on her apron, and instead of telling Mike to show some respect, she sided with him. He's right, honey. You should let them enjoy it too. Mike knows more about these cars anyway. In that moment, something crystallized in my mind. Every dismissive comment about my career, every time they'd minimized my achievements, every loan that was never repaid, every boundary that was ignored, it all came into sharp focus, and I saw the situation for what it really was. I wish I could say I had some dramatic response, that I yelled or made a scene or did something cinematically satisfying. Instead, I just stood there, watching this man who hadn't held a real job in 6 years sitting in my $180,000 car that he hadn't even asked to use, making jokes about my career that had been supporting him and his delusions for years, while my own blood laughed along. The worst part wasn't even the disrespect. It was the entitlement, the absolute certainty in their minds that they had the right to take whatever they wanted from me, that my possessions were community property, that my success belonged to everyone except me. Instead of causing a scene, I did something different. Something that, looking back, probably scared them more than any amount of yelling would have. I smiled, nodded, walked back inside, calmly grabbed my stuff, and ordered an Uber. Mom followed me, of course. Don't be so sensitive. They're just having fun. Her voice had that tone, the one immigrant kids know well. The one that says you're being too American, too individualistic, not understanding enough of family obligations. But for the first time in my life, that voice didn't work on me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not my struggling immigrant mother who needed my help, but someone who had become complicit in her children's exploitation, someone who would sacrifice one child's well-being for another's delusions. The Uber ride home was surreal. I felt like I was floating outside my body, watching myself make decisions that would change everything. I spent the next 4 hours executing what I now realize had been forming in my subconscious for months, a plan to cut the cancer out of my life. The funny thing about running a cybersecurity firm is that you spend a lot of time thinking about worst-case scenarios. You have to imagine how systems might fail, how trust can be exploited, how seemingly minor vulnerabilities can cascade into catastrophic breaches. That mindset kicked in hard. During those 4 hours after I left Mom's house, I sat down at my home office desk, opened my laptop, and felt an almost eerie calm wash over me. This wasn't emotional anymore. This was incident response. And just like I tell my clients when they're dealing with a security breach, the first step is to stop the bleeding. First call was to my lawyer. Yeah, I had one on retainer. Learned that lesson the hard way after the third time Mike borrowed my lake house for his networking events and left me with property damage. She answered despite it being nearly 9 p.m. on a Sunday. That's how she is, and that's why I keep her on retainer. Lisa, I said, remember that worst-case scenario we discussed last month? The one where we mapped out what would happen if things with Mike went south? It's happening. I need you to execute everything we planned. While she started working on her end, I began systematically documenting everything. Opened up a fresh OneNote page and started timeline mapping every loan, every unauthorized use of my property, every financial entanglement, dates, amounts, witnesses, communications, everything. The kind of documentation that makes lawyers smile and fraudsters sweat. Then came the car situation. Called the police non-emergency line and reported my vehicle as being used without authorization. Gave them the exact location from the car's GPS tracker. Bet Mike didn't know about that feature. The dispatcher asked if I wanted to press charges. I hesitated for a split second, remembering Mom's voice saying family supports family. Then I thought about Mike's laugh while sitting in my car, and I said yes. Next up, financial containment. I pulled up my banking apps and started going through them one by one. Every account Mike had ever had access to, every card I'd co-signed, every financial connection. I began severing them all. It was like performing digital amputation, cutting away infected limbs to save the body. The lake house was its own challenge. Called the management company at their emergency number. I need you to change all access codes immediately, I told them. And I need a full audit of all entry logs for the past 2 years. The manager started to say something about normal business hours, but I cut him off with a mention of my annual maintenance fees. It's amazing how responsive people become when you remind them how much you pay them. Called my bank's fraud department, explained the situation, started the process of contesting charges, pulled up every email, text message, and document related to Mike's business ventures that I'd ever been involved with, created secure cloud backups of everything, changed all my passwords, not just the obvious ones. Every single digital account I had, banking, social media, email, cloud storage, everything. Generated new random passwords, enabled two-factor authentication wherever possible, the kind of security lockdown I recommend to clients after a breach. The whole time I was doing this, my phone was blowing up. The calls started rolling in about an hour after I left Mom's house, first from Rachel, then Mom, then Mike, then various other family members. I watched the notifications pile up but didn't answer a single one. Each missed call just reinforced that I was doing the right thing. Around midnight, the text messages started getting interesting. Mike was apparently stranded 40 miles from home because the police had shown up asking questions about the car. That's when the tone changed from entitled demands to desperate pleading. Rachel's messages were a masterclass in emotional manipulation. How could you do this to your own sister? We're family. I can't believe you're being so selfish. Each message just made me more certain I was doing the right thing. Mom's voicemails were the hardest to ignore, her voice cracking as she talked about how I was breaking her heart, how she didn't raise me to be like this, how your father would be so disappointed. But here's the thing. I finally realized that she had it backwards. Dad would have been disappointed, but not in me. He would have been disappointed in how she let one child exploit another in the name of family. By 1 a.m., I'd received 73 missed calls. The family group chat had exploded with messages about how I was destroying the family with my selfishness and materialism. Aunts and uncles I hadn't heard from in months were suddenly very concerned about family unity. Cousins were posting vague social media updates about toxic people in true colors. Rachel posted a huge Facebook rant about how I was destroying the family with my selfishness. It was full of half-truths and outright lies, carefully crafted to make me look like the villain. I didn't bother responding, just documented it, saved screenshots, and added it to the growing file of evidence. The real kicker? While all this digital chaos was unfolding, while my phone was blowing up with notifications and my email was filling with increasingly desperate messages, I felt peaceful for the first time in years. I wasn't trying to manage everyone else's emergencies. I wasn't trying to be the family fixer. I wasn't trying to carry the weight of everyone's expectations. The meeting with my lawyer the next morning revealed the kind of damage that makes accountants need a drink. We sat in her office, spreadsheets spread across her massive desk like a paper trail of betrayal, and the numbers just kept getting bigger. $347,900. That's what the initial tally came to when we added up all the loans, damages, and unauthorized charges. But that wasn't even the beginning. Sarah, my girlfriend, 27, female, who works in forensic accounting, had taken one look at the preliminary numbers and immediately recognized the patterns. "These aren't random charges," she said, her professional instincts kicking in. "This looks systematic, like someone who knows exactly what they're doing." She offered to dig deeper, and what she found made me physically ill. The credit cards were just the tip of the iceberg. Mike had opened 5 different ones in my name, each with limits that maxed out at exactly 90% utilization, just below the threshold that would trigger automatic fraud alerts. He'd been paying the minimum payments from one card to keep the others current, a financial shell game that would have eventually imploded even if I hadn't caught on. The lake house situation was even worse than I'd imagined. Remember those networking events he'd been hosting? Turns out Mike had been subletting my property on Airbnb for the past 2 years. He'd created a fake profile using my business email, which he had access to because he'd helped with my taxes, and had been pocketing the rental income. The management company's audit revealed over $60,000 in unreported income from these unauthorized rentals. The property damage from these rentals explained why he always insisted on handling the repairs himself. He was hiding the paper trail. But the real kicker came when we started digging into how he'd been using my business reputation. Mike had been listing my company as a reference for various loans and business ventures. He'd created fake letterhead with my company logo, and had been writing himself glowing recommendation letters. We found at least 7 different loan applications where he'd forged my signature as a guarantor. The total potential liability? Over $500,000. While we were discovering all this, Mike showed up at my house. My security cameras caught him trying every door, looking through windows, even checking under the doormat for a spare key, which had mysteriously disappeared months ago. Guess who had it the whole time? He was sending me text messages that ranged from aggressive to manipulative. "Stop being a little bitch. Rachel is crying because of you. Mom might need heart medication because of this stress. Just give me access to the car. I have investors to meet." Each message was more desperate than the last. But the real punch to the gut came from Rachel. She sent me this long message about how I was destroying their lives. "How could you do this to us? We're about to close on our dream house. The bank needs your income verification as a guarantor. Please don't ruin this." That's when everything clicked. The dream house they'd been talking about for months, the one they were supposedly buying with Mike's investment returns. They were counting on using my income to qualify for the mortgage. They'd already submitted loan applications with my forged signature as a guarantor. The down payment they'd bragged about saving, that was money from the unauthorized Airbnb rentals of my lake house. Sarah found evidence that Mike had been creating elaborate fake documents to show Rachel, making her believe their investment portfolio was thriving. Bank statements, trading accounts, even fake emails from supposed business partners. All meticulously forged to maintain the illusion that his schemes were successful. She'd given up her research career, her independence, everything, based on lies. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. Mike had been running a complex web of financial fraud, using my identity and resources as collateral. He'd created a house of cards so intricate that it would have taken years to fully unravel if we hadn't caught it when we did. The scary part? He was good at it, really good. The kind of good that makes you realize this probably wasn't his first time doing something like this. My lawyer sat back in her chair after reviewing everything and just shook her head. "In 15 years of practice," she said, "I've never seen someone this methodically exploit family connections for financial gain. This isn't opportunistic fraud. This is calculated, long-term financial predation." The most painful part wasn't even the money. It was realizing how long this had been going on, how many people had to have known, or at least suspected, something was wrong, and how no one had said anything. My own sister, who I'd grown up with, who I'd protected and supported, had watched this happen. Maybe she didn't know the full extent, but she had to have known something wasn't right. They say the truth sets you free, but nobody tells you how much that freedom hurts. The weeks following my lawyer's formal demand letters were like watching a bomb detonate in slow motion, each revelation creating new waves of destruction in my family. My mom showed up at my office unannounced one afternoon. Security called up to ask if they should let her through. I almost said no, but something in me needed this confrontation. She walked into my office looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, clutching her purse like a shield. "Just talk to him," she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "He says he can explain everything." The desperation in her eyes was painful to see. This was the woman who had raised me, who had taught me about integrity and hard work. Now she was sitting in my office, asking me to sweep years of fraud under the rug. I pulled out the stack of credit card statements, spreading them across my desk. Showed her the forged signatures, the unauthorized charges, the bounced checks. Pointed out the dates, the patterns, the deliberate nature of it all. She sat there for what felt like hours, just staring at the papers, occasionally reaching out to touch a signature as if trying to make it real. "But he's family now," she whispered. And in those 4 words I heard the weight of every cultural expectation, every immigrant parent fear of broken families, every sacrifice she'd made to keep us together. That's when I realized they weren't just enabling Mike. They were so deeply invested in the illusion of family harmony that they couldn't face reality anymore. The text messages got increasingly desperate as the legal machinery ground forward. "Mike, come on, man, we can work this out. I just need a little time to get things sorted. Don't do this to your sister. Mom, your father would be so disappointed in you after everything we've done for you." Each message was like a knife twisting deeper into old wounds. The mention of my father hit particularly hard. Would he really be disappointed in me for protecting myself? Or would he be disappointed in how his family had become vultures, feeding off each other in the name of loyalty? As the weeks dragged on, I found myself grieving, not just for the money lost, but for the family I thought I had. The sister who used to be my best friend, the mother who taught me about integrity, the extended family who I thought had our best interests at heart. It was like watching a photograph fade in reverse, the clear image of my family dissolving into something unrecognizable. Yesterday marked a turning point I never saw coming. Sarah was helping me organize my tax documents for the upcoming IRS audit, another lovely consequence of Mike's fraud, when she noticed something that made her forensic accounting instincts tingle. She held up a statement I'd never seen before, her face showing the kind of concern that makes my stomach drop. "Babe," she said, her voice careful and measured, "why do you have a credit card statement from Capital One? I thought you only used Chase and Amex." The question hung in the air like smoke before a fire alarm. I don't have a Capital One card. I've never had a Capital One card. And yet there it was, a statement addressed to me, showing charges I'd never made. That discovery sent us down a rabbit hole that made everything we'd uncovered before look like a warm-up act. We spent the next 4 hours pulling my credit reports from all 3 bureaus. The damage we found made me physically sick. Mike hadn't just opened a few unauthorized cards, he'd created an entire shadow financial life in my name. 6 credit cards I never knew about. Store cards at Nordstrom, Best Buy, even Home Depot, all maxed out, all opened in the last 8 months, right after I'd helped them with rent for the 3rd time. All using my social security number that Mike had from helping with my taxes last year. Total unauthorized debt, $127,000. But it wasn't just the amount that horrified me. It was the calculated nature of it all. The charges were carefully spread out to avoid triggering fraud alerts. The payment minimums were being met through a complex web of balance transfers. Mike had even set up paperless billing to different email addresses he'd created using variations of my name, ensuring I'd never see physical statements. I called my lawyer at 10 p.m. Lisa answered on the first ring. Yeah, that's how bad things had gotten. My lawyer now answers my late-night calls without hesitation. By midnight, we'd filed police reports for identity theft. By 2 a.m., I'd frozen my credit at all 3 bureaus. The machinery of justice was finally moving at full speed. This morning, Rachel showed up at my door. Not calling first, not texting, just pounding on my door at 7 a.m., like she was trying to wake the dead. "How could you call the police on your own family?" she screamed. "They arrested Mike at work. Do you know how embarrassing that was?" I just stared at her, this woman who used to be my little sister, who I'd protected and supported her entire life. "Did you know?" I asked. The question wasn't loud, but it filled the space between us like a physical barrier. She looked away. And that was all the answer I needed. Maybe she hadn't known the full extent. Maybe she hadn't known about the identity theft, but she'd known something was wrong. She'd chosen to ignore it, to enable it, to become complicit in my exploitation. Mom called next. Not to check if I was okay after discovering my identity had been stolen. Not to express horror at what Mike had done. No. She wanted me to drop the charges. Because Mike has a plan to pay everything back. Her voice had that familiar tone of maternal authority. The one that used to make me feel guilty for disappointing her. I actually laughed. It wasn't a happy sound, like the plan to pay back the other $350,000 he owes me. That's different, she insisted, her voice taking on that particular immigrant mom cadence that usually meant the conversation was over. He was trying to build a future for your sister. You're just being vindictive now. That's when something in me just broke, or maybe it finally healed. I'm still not sure which. He's going to jail, Mom. I'm not dropping the charges. And anyone who knew about this and didn't tell me, they can go with him for all I care. She started crying then, talking about family and forgiveness, about how we need to stick together, about how in our culture we don't air our dirty laundry like this. I hung up. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my mother. An hour ago, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Mike calling from jail. The sheer audacity of what he said next would be almost impressive if it wasn't so infuriating. Listen, he said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of someone about to pitch a scam. I know this looks bad, but I've got a new investment opportunity lined up. Premium real estate trust, guaranteed 300% returns. I just need $50,000 for bail and I can fix all of this. You know I'm good for it, bro. I saved the recording and sent it to my lawyer. Some people never learn, but their lessons aren't my responsibility anymore. The family's been blowing up my phone. Rachel keeps texting that she'll never forgive me for this. Mom's latest message declared that no son of mine would send family to jail. Aunts and uncles I haven't heard from in years are suddenly very concerned about family unity. You always thought you were better than us. But you know what? For the first time in my life, their words mean nothing. The fog has lifted. I see them all clearly now, not as the family I wish they were, but as the people they've chosen to be. Sarah's helping me pack up the house as I type this. We close on a new place next month. Different state, fresh start. The lake house is sold. All accounts are closed, and my credit is locked down tighter than Fort Knox. My lawyer estimates Mike's looking at 7 to 10 years for identity theft and fraud. Rachel's finally served him divorce papers. Mom's house is in foreclosure because apparently Mike had convinced her to take out a second mortgage using forged documents in my name. And me? I'm finally free. They wanted an ATM. Well, this ATM just installed some hardcore security features, and the only person with access to my life now is me. Final update. It's been 2 months. Moved to Colorado, bought a house with Sarah, who said yes when I proposed last week. Haven't spoken to any of them since. Mom still sends guilt trip emails from new addresses. Rachel's trying to warn my clients about me through LinkedIn. But you know what? I sleep like a baby now. Sometimes cutting off the poison is the only way to heal.